Let's go to Jason. Do you think Florida is on a better trajectory than Miami? I mean, the Canes just beat the brakes off them, and it just wasn't Cam Ward. Actually, Jason, I do think Florida's on a better trajectory than Miami because I watched the end of last season. We were at the Florida-Miami game. Like, Miami was clearly better than Florida in that game. And if Florida's offensive and defensive lines had played the way they did against Miami and Texas A&M for the rest of the season, Florida wouldn't be on this list. But the difference is Florida's offensive and defensive lines were mauling LSU and Ole Miss at the end of the season, and DJ Lagway is DJ Lagway. Meanwhile, Miami doesn't have Cam Ward anymore, doesn't have Xavier Restrepo anymore, doesn't have Jacoby George anymore, and has Carson Beck coming off elbow surgery. So if you want to compare those two things, yeah, Florida definitely seems like it's on a better trajectory.
I think that you could make the case that we have Miami ranked a little bit too low still.
Because of the offensive line situation, because they're going to have a good offensive line, and that's gonna help.
They also, like, Mark Fletcher's a really good running back. Ruben Bain's one of the best defensive linemen in the country. Like, they have pieces, and I don't know, like, what
is the defense going to be any good though?
Well, that's the reason why they were so low, because it's like, even if you are returning dudes on defense, and I think that, like, one of their best corners is coming back, and they've got some good defensive ends coming back. But those players were on this team this past year, and their defense couldn't stop a nosebleed. So, like, I think that when you say the word trajectory, this is what it means: projecting the future. Like, I think Miami is going to be a solid team this next year, but I don't think they're going to be nearly as good as they were last year, because I just think that Cam Ward was special. And the other thing too is, like, Xavier Restrepo, I think, was the most underrated player in college football this past year. Anybody who has watched this guy play knows he's going to be a really good pro. And then meanwhile, like, Florida, I mean, let me just ask you this, because you caught me with my pants on a little bit earlier with Missouri, but how much does the quarterback position, like, how much did that influence you? Because it influenced me quite a bit.
A ton. Like,
DJ Lagway may be the best quarterback in the sport next year. Like, period.
It's possible. So period. DJ Lagway finished. He got enough attempts through the end of the season, through the bowl game, to qualify to make the lists, the national leaders list. So he actually finished second in yards per attempt. He can be a lot more
happens when you have a game with 7 completions and 681 yards. Remember that game? I don't remember what
the
game
Kentucky game is the one Ari is referencing. He was 7 of 14 for 259 yards. It's one of the strangest stat lines you'll ever see.
But Jaden Baugh is a dog, dude. Like, it's not just DJ.
Jaden Baugh is awesome.
But
they've
got really good.
It's not even that. It's the offensive line, which they bring back pretty much everybody. Jake Slaughter might be the best center in the country. And then the defensive line, which they lost some edge guys that they weren't expecting to start. And I don't know that I feel like they're probably not as deep as they should be at the edge. But, like, getting Caleb Banks back as a defensive tackle is probably bigger than anybody they could have gotten in the portal. This is a guy who would have been like a 2nd or 3rd round draft pick and played so well at the end of the season. Like, he's the reason they were so dominant against LSU, against an offensive line that had not given up a bunch of sacks, and all of a sudden Florida's sacking Garrett Nussmeier left and right. Like, and I would not have put Florida here if not for that improvement on both lines of scrimmage, because, like I said earlier, we were at the Miami game. Both lines for Florida were terrible against Miami, got dominated by Miami. They got dominated by Texas A&M. If they had not changed and grown over the season, I wouldn't be saying this stuff. But you go to the Georgia game, Lagway's hurt. They're playing Aiden Warner, the walk-on from Yale, and they're still opening holes against Georgia's defense. Then they go play LSU and beat them. Then they play Ole Miss and beat them and had the best. Now, it still wasn't a great rushing day against Ole Miss, but it was actually the best per carry average anybody had against Ole Miss all year. So if it's that, then they can play with everybody in their schedule. When you need complete nutrition and you don't have time to cook or figure out what exit you're going to stop at, you go with the Huel Black Edition right here. This is complete nutrition in this bottle. 35 grams of protein, 7 grams of fiber, 27 vitamins and minerals. This is a meal right here, one complete meal, and it is fantastic. When you are a busy professional, I'm busy, I'm not professional. But when you got stuff going on, Huel is a lifesaver. My wife loves to grab these and take them for lunch at work. My kids will hit them out the door in the morning. If they can't get breakfast, I will grab them if I need a breakfast. The world's #1 complete nutrition brand. It's a complete meal in seconds. Just grab, sip, and go. No more skip meals. No more unfulfilling snacks. Makes it easy with nutrition that fits in your life right now. You go to Huel.com. That's HUEL.com. You get 15% off with the code STAPLES15.
Here's the thing that I want to know. They got sort of on the receiver from UCLA too, right?
Yeah. And Dallas Wilson, the 5-star #1 ranked receiver recruit in the country. He had signed with Oregon and then decided, no, I'm gonna
that was big. So he might actually be the top target next year, right?
That's my guess. And Trey Wilson comes back. Remember Eugene Wilson III was injured most of the season, so he's back too.
Okay, so they should have pretty good receivers too. They have a great running back, good line, elite level quarterback, and they could have like a 5-star receiver who turns into a phenom next year. Like again, like what is so crazy about this? Like I just don't. I whenever I look at the list and people are upset, like I know that it's not perfect and precise, but like what is the most egregious thing on here?
Well, I'll play devil's advocate on the Florida one because Florida fans will say this to me too. And they'll say it's still Billy Napier. Like remember after
I hate that stuff. It bothers me.
Well, remember after the Tennessee game when I said this is worse for Billy Napier than if he'd lost by 50? Because it was the same kind of decision making that had been criticized, but it felt like it all happened at once. And so he's got to prove that he's a better coach than he's shown. Because otherwise, Florida doesn't wind up here. Florida winds up unranked, and he winds up fired.
Yeah. So when it comes to like coaching tendencies, right? Like, who are the coaches that are most known for not being great game day coaches? Like, I think there are two.
Billy Napier, Mario
Billy
Cristobal.
Napier doesn't hit my top two, but it would be Cristobal, and who's the other one? Think about the playoff. There's one out there that people think it.
James Franklin.
Yeah. James Franklin, I thought, did a really good job this year. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
Like, and I know
I agree.
Mario Cristobal has had some clock management issues at times, and I think he had a few this year even. But like, I don't know if I think that like Miami can't be good because their coach is a moron. Like, I know.
I also think Mario Cristobal's clock management has improved. It's like there were issues at Oregon that followed him to Miami. The Georgia Tech Miami thing from a few years ago is the standout, obviously. But I thought situationally he was better. And look, they had some situations where they had to come back. You can argue about the call at the end of the Virginia Tech game, but they managed to figure that out. The Cal game, they came back. If you mismanage the clock there, you lose. They ended up winning that game. So I think all of this is situational. Like Mario Cristobal had a great quarterback this year, and having a great quarterback allows a lot of that stuff to dissipate. That's where I think Billy Napier is now, because the more comfortable he got using DJ Lagway and having DJ Lagway be the guy, it felt like the play calling looked different too. The decision making felt different.
Whereas I think that it's easier to look like a great coach when you have a transcendent talent who pulls plays out of his ass every other play.
Exactly.
Like that's the other thing too. It's like, how many times is Florida going to move the sticks when they would have been punting last year because DJ Lagway does something special? Like, I think that like my #1 thing with Billy Napier has never been like, oh, can he figure out a way to call a functional game plan? I think they haven't had the players to be good. And I finally feel like they've
also done stupid things like they not being able to get enough people on the field in certain special teams units like that and that continuously happening. Like, yeah, like I mean, that's a problem. But I think DJ Lagway makes them different.